And thank you for joining. And we'll start with, as usual, with a short breathing exercise followed by motivations. Then we can try to reflect, contemplate, thinking, whether we want to have a inner peace, happiness in this life, or inner peace and happiness in future life. Or whether we want to achieve ultimate happiness of liberations, or happiness of fully enlightenment, whatever we want to achieve, any of those. The way to do, and the only way to do, is by reducing and overcoming the defilement, the delusions. And in order to overcome the delusions completely, we need to overcome the very root of all this delusion. The self-grasping ignorance, or the ignorance the view of transitory collections. And in order to overcome that fundamental ignorance, we need to develop the wisdom realizing emptiness. To be able to develop that realizations. And to be able to have that realization, we need to contemplate, meditate. In order to have a correct meditation, contemplation, we need to have a correct reflections. And for that, we need to study and understand correctly. Understanding what that fundamental ignorance is. And to be able to identify that ignorance unmistakably, and then how to develop that wisdom that can act as a direct antidote to that ignorance. So with hope and inspiration to have understanding of that, or at least have some imprint, that's why we have come here together. Even if we cannot have realization at this point, at least by hearing the teachings, reading, reflecting, contemplating, we will continue to have more and more imprint, thereby making more and more easier in this life, if not in this life, in future lives. And may all our acts of coming together, putting all the effort, time, energy, become cause and conditions to generate all the five paths, 10 bhumis, and eventually achieve fully enlightenment or fully enlightened state, so that we can fulfill the highest purpose of oneself and all sentient beings. Okay. I prostrate to the Arya table jam, thus did I hear one time the Bhagavan was dwelling on the mass of vultures mountain in Rasgriha, together with a great community of monks and great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagavan was observed in the concentration of the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then through the power of the Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection and wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or donor of the lineage who wish to practice the activities of profound perfection and wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly, beholding those five aggregates also as an empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness form, emptiness not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factor, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, the all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, standless, not without stand, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factor, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, Bodhisattva rely on the dual in perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond ego, they reach each point of the nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in 3 times also manifestly completely awakened the unsurpassable perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that truly pacifies all suffering, should be known as the truth since it is not false. The mantra of perfection of wisdom declares, Tayata Om Gade Gade Parasam Gade Bodhi Soha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva master, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration, commented the Bodhisattva master by Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. Is it like that? Is it like that? One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoiced. The Bhagavan having those spoken, the Venerable Shariputra, the Bodhisattva master by Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding him the entire day, along with the God, all of the gods, human, Asura, and Gandharva, overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. Sa shibe ge chon shen me to da re ra le she yin de gen ba de sang ge shen do mi de o wai do kwen nama ta shin la che ba jo ye dang guru rana mandala gani ataya. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soge sonam la changchu pato dane kya da ki shuje ki pe sonam ke dola penche sangye dhuba sangye chodang soge sonam changchu pato dane da ki shuje ki pe sonam shuje ki pe sonam dola penche sangye dhuba. So last week we discussed a little bit about as I mentioned, about Lama Tsongkhapa was mentioning about trying to differentiate or explain what the view of Transitory collections and the self-grasping ignorance of the persons. As I mentioned before, in many teachings, sometimes you can see the self-grasping is presented as the fundamental ignorance. That is the very root of all the delusions. And then sometimes also you see in certain scriptures the view of the Transitory collection as being the very root of all the delusions. And so sometimes there can be confusions, whether they are same or different. And so I think that was where Lama Tsongkhapa, even in Chandrakirti's, even in his writing of the Middle Way, at the very beginning, there's that there is he paid homage. Chandrakirti paid homage to the compassion by saying, I pay homage to the compassion that has that feel compassion to all sentient beings who are suffering endlessly, like the wheel, what do you call, wheel
of life.
Wind wheel.
The wheel.
No. Like they use wind, like wheel to pump the water, you know.
Windmill.
Like a windmill?
Windmill.
Windmill. Okay.
Windmill.
Yeah, like windmill, you know, endlessly, due to first grasping to self, and then after that grasping to mind. First grasping to self, and then after that grasping to mind, and due to that then delusion arises, and due to that then sentient being experience endlessly sufferings, like the windmill, you know. And so in that statement, he explained the view of transitory view, the the self-grasping of the persons, and grasping to the mind as a very root of all the delusions, you know. And so then another, in the 6th chapter, when he explained about the emptiness, then in that Nimokyo Mali Talejung, Dani di Najabai Dana Gohas. By having understood all the delusions arises from the view of transitory collections. By understanding all the delusions arises from transitory collection. And by understanding the self is the observed object of that transitory view, and then the yogi try to by understanding selflessness try to overcome that. So here he explained transitory view as the very root of all the delusions. So even in that, you see, sometimes he used the self-grasping ignorance as the very root of delusion, and sometimes you see the transitory view as being the very root of all delusions. And sometimes then there is little confusions, and so then I think that was why Lama Tsongkhapa was trying to clarify that, you know, last time when we went through that. And I think it will also come, you know. So last week we discussed, you know, in terms of the transitory view, you know, or that fundamental ignorance. So there's sense of, you know, the object of transitory view is either self or yours or mine's, you know, it is two objects. They rest with the self mind. But when we say mind, Lama Tsongkhapa also clarified here, when you say my body, my nose, my ear, and if the focus is on the ear, nose, or then that doesn't become the transitory collection, because emphasize become the phenomena. My nose is phenomena. My ear is phenomena. My body is phenomena. My mind is phenomena. So when you emphasize that, then it becomes the selfness of phenomena, not selfness of the persons. Okay, but when you emphasize mind, not on the mind even to the my nose or my ear or my mind or my body, but emphasizing mind. When you say mind, then it's come back to a kind of sense of more focus on the mind than actually the object that. So then in that, that is the way the view of the transitory view, you know. So there is transitory view that object is the self, and then transitory view that's object is the mind. Okay, so the object of the transitory view has to be either self or mind, whereas the fundamental ignorance, grasping, any object doesn't have to be self or mind, you know. For example, grasping your body to be inherently existing is fundamental ignorance, but it's not a transitory, the view of transitory collections. Okay. Also, when you are grasping another person, oh, again it went. Sometime my screen goes up. Also, when you are grasping another person to be inherently existent, that is again a fundamental ignorance, but it's not a view of transitory, because other persons is neither self or neither mind. Do you get it? So when you have a ignorance that's grasping, let's say Mary to be inherent existence, that is fundamental ignorance, but it's not a transitory view, the view of transitory collections. Okay, the view of transitory collection has to be either self or mind. And so there is slightly different in that, even though both of them are fundamental ignorance. Okay? Even though both of the fundamental ignorance, even though both of them are very root of all the delusions, but there is a difference between transitory, the view of transitory collections and the ignorance that's grasping, the ignorance that's grasping of the phenomena of persons, okay? And so I think that was where I think Lama Tsongkhapa was trying to clarify, and I think we kind of discussed a little bit, we read a little bit there. And also another thing that Lama Tsongkhapa we discussed last week a little bit is, again, I just want to clear a little bit because when you talk about transitory, the view of transitory collections, so we talk about the object being the person, the self, okay? The object of that, the observed object of that view of transitory collection is the self or the persons. And when we talk about that self person, that observed object of that transitory, the view of transitory collections is the person that exists in conventionally, you know, conventionally. Okay. The observed object of that transitory view is a person that exists conventionally or relatively. That person is not something that we are trying to negate. And so then what is that person that exists on conventional or relative level? Then Lama Tsongkhapa explained, according to different school of thought within the Buddhists, some of them say all the five aggregates are that person, and some of them say, you know, the continuity of aggregate is the person, and some of them says, you know, the mind basis of all, such as the school of mind-only school says that, and then some other says the mental consciousness is the, and then in Prasangika, neither or all of them are the person neither each of them are conventionally or relatively existing self. So here the self is merely imputed. And that is the unique of the Prasangika. So because all those different schools where all those different schools who posit those different, whether it's all five aggregates or the continuity aggregate or the mind basis of all or mental constant, they all believe that when you try to find within the basis who is the person, what is the person, that object within the basis you should be able to find. If you cannot find within the basis, then they cannot proceed it to exist. So since they cannot proceed, they cannot proceed or establish it to exist if they cannot find within the any of the basis. So then therefore they try to find within, and then they find in those different, you know. But in Prasangika, when you try to find, you cannot find in any of those parts or basis, whether it's each of those parts, each of five aggregates, or collection of five aggregates, or continuity of the aggregate. You cannot find it. You cannot find when you analyze it in that kind of. But at the same time, even though it cannot find with that kind of ultimate analysis, at the same time, you cannot deny it does not exist. And so then how do it exist? It exists merely imputed on the basis, on the basis of coming all these parts together. On the basis of all these parts coming together, then such as persons is merely imputed on that. And so that is the object, merely imputed. The self is the object of the view of transitory collections. So I think that was where Lama Tsongkhapa, again, we went a little bit on that. And again, I think even though we went through, maybe I don't know whether I clarify enough to really, so I just wanted to kind of summarize that a little bit. So then, and so then that is where in Chandrakirti, as I recited, by understanding all the delusions arise from the view of collections, and by understanding understanding by understanding the self or the persons as the object of that. So that one is the self that exists, merely imputed. By understanding that the yogi should try to overcome, negate the self. So this second self that we are talking about, negate the self, then that is called talking about the self that does not exist. So then that is the self that is the object of apprehensions. There is object of observe and there is object of apprehensions. Two self. Okay? There is two object. The object of the object of being observed and the object of apprehensions. And the object of observe is the self that exists, and that cannot be negated because that exists. But then what is being negated is the object of apprehensions. By that means, you know, first there's the sense of appearance of that self, me, Gishisharab, and then grasping that Gishisharab to be truly existence, Gishisharab. That is the apprehending self, you know, and that self does not exist. The way fundamental ignorance or the way the view of transitory collection grabs or apprehend the self is as a truly existence. Okay? And that is to be negated. Truly or inherently existing self. So I think that is another we have to kind of differentiate these two. You know, the observed object, the self, which the self or the person, which is the object of being observed, that is existing self, and then the self that is being apprehended, and that means that ignorance or the view of self, the view of transitory collection, grasping self to be inherently, and that is one that the yogi has to negate and overcome, and through understanding of the selflessness, that one. Okay. I don't know whether whether I made it more complications or whether I made it what does prasangika means in English? I think maybe it might come later, you know. I think I really don't know exactly the English term, because Thalkur is the way to do is some maybe, I don't know, maybe it might come later, differentiating between the Savatandrika, Madhyamika, and Prasangika Madhyamika, but I think it become more complicating. Then I think maybe it requires a lot of Thalkur. When we try to understand something through reasoning and logics, there's different ways, you know. When we try to use reasoning, inference to have a understanding of something, so you should reason. Let's say this book is impermanent because this book is impermanent because this is decaying moment by moment. So using that kind of reason logic, you know, there is called, again, I don't know all the terms, you know, tak, chojen, khapa and tak. They need three kind of things. And in order to convince someone to understand inference by using this book is impermanent. This book is the objects. Impermanent is something trying to prove is impermanent, and this is the reasoning because it is decaying or deteriorating or momentarily, moment by moment. That is what we call Rangyugi Tak. Again, I don't know what yeah, that is one of the struggle I have. You know, that is something I have always told. You know, I struggle with a lot of those philosophical terms.
See, Geshe?
Yeah.
I think that you're trying to say the Siddhantrika uses inference, logical inference. But the Prasangika is usually translated as consequence. So it usually means that you show that there are consequences that lead to contradictions in Prasangika. Whereas, in other words, the inference would be a straightforward logical proof, as opposed to showing that consequences lead to contradictions. So I think that the Prasangika in English is sometimes translated as the consequentialist school, the school of consequences.
Okay, thank you, consequentialist. But the way they use is by contradicting. They don't use same kind of reasoning. They say you don't have to use same reasoning in order for someone to overcome misunderstanding or something they have not understood, but by using kind of by using certain contradiction, then their misunderstanding is overcome. So I think, yeah, that is, we call culture. So yeah, so I think maybe, yeah. Thank you, Bob, for that. So where are we? Okay, I think we are in page number 226. And I think is where there is where there's a difference between observed object and true apprehension and true existence. Did we finish that? I think we finished that. Yeah, I think maybe I just explained
Just
it.
finished.
Yeah, just finish that. So then there is the Chandrakidis, and then to that Lama Tsongkhapa says this. So the object of apprehension is truly existence for the ignorance, and so this ignorance, afflicted ignorance. Initiative. So normally there are, again, I think here is trying to differentiate between the Prasangika and other schools. Babasika and Sautandrika, they only accept this, they only explain the selfness of person. They don't have idea, or they don't explain the selfness of the phenomena. Okay. And then among the Mahayana tenets, such as Mind-Only School and Savatandrika, Madhyamika and Prasangya, they all explain selfness of person and selfness of phenomena. Okay. And then to that. And within that, then the selfness of person is explained as an afflictive ignorance. And then the selfness of phenomena is explained as a obscuration, obscuration omniscient, but not afflictive obscuration. They don't say that is, so they differentiate, you know, whether it's a Mind-Only School or Savatandrika Madhyamika, they explain there is two, selfness of person and selfness of phenomena. And they think selfness of persons is afflictive obscurations. But then they say the selfness of phenomena is obscurations of omniscient, but is not afflictive ignorance. Because they differentiate between the object of apprehension. For the other schools, the object of apprehension is not same between the ignorance that's grasping of grasping person and the grasping of the phenomena. So therefore, but in Prasangika, the object of apprehension is the same, is apprehending inherently truly existent, whether it's ignorance that's grasping of the person or whether it's ignorance grasping of the phenomena. The only difference is the object, the observed object. In terms of apprehending, it's the same. Whether ignorance grasping person or grasping of the phenomena, they both grasp inherently or truly. And so therefore there's no difference. So therefore that is why here it is called afflictive ignorance, because they both are in terms of apprehending the object, there is no difference. Only the difference is one is the object is the self, and the other is the object's other phenomena. You know, in terms of apprehending, there is no difference. But other schools, they explain the apprehending differently. You know, not only the objects, but the way they apprehend it differently. So therefore, they say one is the obscuration of the afflictive emotion, and one is the obscuration to the omniscience. And here it doesn't. So I think that is where here Lama Tsongkhapa is saying. And so then here Lama Tsongkhapa also said, not only Chandrakirti said that, but also the noble father, it is also taught by noble father and son, that is the Nagarjuna and Aryadeva. So, you know, it's saying it's not only the intention of the Chandrakirti, but it's the same intention of Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, you know. And so in that it says, you know, that which conceive things born from the cause, you know, some things that arises from the cause and conditions, and condition to be real and not truly existing, grasping or apprehending all the objects, conditional objects that depend on cause and condition, to apprehend as a truly or by real or truly existing, it was said to be ignorant by the teacher, meaning the Buddha. Buddha said, you know, all phenomena that is conditional phenomena that is apprehending or grasping as a real or truly existing or inherently existing is taught to be ignorance by the Buddhas, you know. And from that ignorance, 12 ling arises, you know. So it is talking about the evolution of 12 ling, how we take a rebirth in samsara through the 12 ling and how we suffer. And so very root of all this 12 ling is this fundamental ignorance. Through ignorance, then there is the action. By actions, then we leave the imprint in the consciousness. And by having relieved the imprint in consciousness, then at the time of then it is activated by craving and grasping. And by having activated by craving and grasping, then it's fully activated to produce the next rebirth. And then in next rebirth, then mind and form and the form and name. And then after the form and name, then six senses, and then contact, feeling, birth, and aging and death. So those are the 12 links. So that is how it is. With good understanding that things are empty, when someone understands how all these phenomena are empty of inherently or truly existence, and through that seeing that reality, then there is no ignorance. Then you overcome the ignorance. When you have that realizations of reality, which is that all those phenomena lack or empty of inherent or truly existence, then we have that realization, then that will act as a direct antidote to the ignorance, and then there is no more ignorance. So then that is the cessation of ignorance, that is end to the ignorance. And so when ignorance is stopped, and then all the rest of the 12 ling also stop. When there's no more ignorance, then there is no more actions created by the ignorance. When there is no more actions, karma created by the ignorance, then there is no imprint to be left by the ignorance. And when there is no imprint left on the consciousness by that actions, karma, then there is no karmic imprint or seed to be activated by craving and grasping, and if there is no karmic seed to be activated or craving and grasping, then there is no karmic seed that fully activated. And when there is no karmic seed that being fully activated to take a rebirth, then there is no more of name and form, and then six senses, contact, feeling, and birth, and when there is no samsaric birth, then there is no aging and death, and so then that is the end to the samsara, So yeah. And then also here saying, also in Precious Garland, I think I said last time, as long as aggregated are apprehended, and I will be apprehending them, So I think we discussed, I think I shared a little bit the story of His Holiness that he's going to talk about before, that in order to have a fully understanding of the selflessness of person or emptiness of person, one need to have also understanding of selflessness of the phenomena such as aggregates, So as long as you have grasping to the aggregate, as long as you have the grasping to the aggregate such as the, our form and feeling and discriminating mind, conventional and consciousness, as we are grasping to that, then it said there will still be certain level of grasping to the self, and so therefore, in order to have a complete and total understanding of selfness of person, then we need to have an understanding of the selfness of aggregates. That is the selfness of phenomena. Okay. So yeah, here is as long as apparition aggregate is not stopped, you will not stop the view of downstairs collection, and the view of downstairs collection is the grasping of the self, or the persons. So, and again here more from Aryadeva 400 stanzas. Again, it explains how that fundamental ignorance is the very root of all the delusions. It is very important to understand that. That is why here again, Lama Tsongkhapa go very truly that how from many different reasoning and from many different Indian sources, Indian master sources, trying to see how all the delusions are very much rooted in that ignorance, or the view of downstairs collections, or that fundamental ignorance. How there is very important to understand that. If we don't understand that, then we lose a very important point. Then we wouldn't understand why correct understanding, realization, emptiness is so crucial to totally free from all the delusion, from all the samsara, If we don't understand that, then we lose very fundamental, important points. And so therefore Lama Tsongkhapa here again, and so in 400 stanzas, it says, like the body, sense in the body and all of them, ignorance. For example, there are 5 senses, okay? The body sense, eye senses, nose senses, ear senses, mouth senses. And so if there's no body, then there's no ear sense. There's no eye sense. There's no senses. There's no, same way. So the body sense is the very foundation of other senses, other 4 senses, eye, ear, nose, and the tongue senses. Okay, those are very much, if there is no body, the body senses, there wouldn't be those senses. So it's just as the 4 senses depend on the body sense, same way all the delusions all the delusions, like the other senses, are very much depend on that fundamental ignorance. All the it arises that fundamental ignorance. If there is no more ignorance, then there is no more delusions. Just like if there is no more body, then there is no other senses. If there's no body senses, then there is no other senses. So that is why he's saying, you know, and that is why the concurring ignorance, all the mental affliction conquer. So therefore, when you are able to overcome the ignorance, then you can overcome all the delusions that are very much rooted in that ignorance. And how can we stop the ignorance? How can we stop the ignorance? Ignorance will no more arise if interdependent arising sin. If we realize emptiness or subtle interdependent arisings, then through that realizations of emptiness or subtle dependent arisings, then we can overcome that fundamental ignorance. And here, therefore, with all effort here, I will talk about it. So therefore, we need to have correct realization of that. And so Lama Tsongkhapa explained a little bit that, you know, so this fundamental ignorance is one of the three poisons. You know, the three poisons are ignorance, attachment, and anger. And even the attachment and anger are rooted in that ignorance. And so therefore here, and again, when we talk about the ignorance, it's talking about afflicted ignorance, because we are talking about three root afflicted emotions. And so this is one of the three afflicted emotions, the ignorance. So Lama Tsongkhapa explained here, in order to overcome that fundamental ignorance, here, you know, they were explaining the need to understand dependent arising as the meaning of emptiness, and understanding emptiness as understanding the meaning in the term of dependent arisings. Okay, so again, this is a very crucial, important point, you know. So then we don't fall in any of the stream when you understand emptiness as a meaning of dependent arisings. So then you don't fall into nihilism, because you understand emptiness as not as nothingness. Do you get it? But as a dependent arising. When we talk about dependent arising, then that means there is something. So you are not negating, there's nothing at all. But if we don't understand emptiness in the meaning of dependent arising, then there is danger feeling that there is nothing and falling to nihilism. And then also understanding dependent arising as a meaning of emptiness, also other way around. When you understand that, then again, you don't fall in the extreme of internalism, where you think depending the cause and effect are inherent existence. You know, you think, oh, there's inherently existing cause that give rise to inherently existing result, or that inherently existing result come through inherent existing cause. That is another extreme. And that is why we say subtle dependent arising, because gross dependent arising, all the Buddhist schools understand that. All the Buddhist schools accept that dependent arising. All the Buddhist schools understand and accept dependent arising, through the seed, the plant arises. Through the seed, due to the seed, then a sprout arises. Through the sprout, then plant arises. Through plant, then the branches, sperm, stem, branches, and the leaves, and the flowers, and the fruit, You know, not only all the Buddhist school, even the non-Buddhist school accept that. You know, that one is not extremely difficult to understand that. That dependent arising. Okay? That dependent arising is not so difficult to understand. You know? Maybe sometimes even the animal could understand a little bit of that. That is why they avoid certain things. Because they know that will give to certain result, that will give them a pain. That means they have some understanding of cause and effect in some way. You know, if I eat this, it will give me pain. If I put my feet on this, it will give me a pain. It will cut me. So even the animal has a little bit some understanding of that, you know, growth. So when we talk about dependent arising, as when you have understanding of dependent arising, then you have understanding of emptiness. When we talk about that, it's talking about very subtle dependent arising. We are not talking about just the gross subtle dependent arising. It is and that is the difficult point, is that one, you know. And sometimes nowadays, a lot of teachers, they don't explain about the subtle. They always explain the gross level dependent arising because it is easy for everyone to understand that, you know. But in order to really, Aryadeva says, when you have understanding of dependent arising, then there will be no more ignorance. And also Nagarjuna says same thing. When they talk about that, when you have understanding of dependent arising, there will be no ignorance. That fundamental ignorance is talking about subtle level of dependent arising. Okay, and and subtle level of dependent arisings is, you know, like depending on the mind that merely impute on the basis of the parts of the collection coming together. When the collections or part of that objects come together on the basis of that, then the mind imputing as that object. So depending on that mind imputing, so merely imputed, so that is where it is. That is the subtle, and that is where the difficult comes, even for us to say, how can it be merely imputed at the same time that I can touch the book? Do you get it? Sometimes we feel, oh, I can touch the book, I can tear it down. How can you say it's merely imputed? You know, oh, there is the table, I can put it here. There's something objective from its own side. I can't put this in a space. It fall down and I can put on the table that can hold it. So how can it be merely imputed? You know, so that is the difficult point here. And that is why emptiness and subtle dependent arising, why it is not easy. The gross level dependent arising is not so difficult, you know. And so I think, so that is where not only we, even the Buddhist great scholars of other schools, they also have difficulty of that, you know, to say that thing exists, but it is only on merely imputed level. They cannot grasp that, you know. They think, you know, there should be something from objective side, you know. There should be something from objective side, you know. So I think So we don't have to be so harsh on ourselves to not be able to grasp fully. Even the great master, Asanga, Baba Viga, Vasubandhu, all of those great masters, even they had a difficult of that, and so that is why, that is why it is said we need a lot of merit and a lot of imprint, and of course a lot of studying, reflecting, contemplating, to so then at the end of that, Lama Tsongkhapa says, in according to the explanation of commentary on this text, afflicted ignorance should therefore be taken as a superimpositions of true existence onto things, So even though there is no true existence from objectively, but the ignorance, project, superimpose onto the objects. And that's how it superimpose project, and that is how it apprehend, And this manner of understanding is set forth clearly by Venerable Chandrakirti, following the example of Buddhapalita commentary Noble One's intention. So I think Noble One probably is here, Nagarjuna's, Buddhapalita was writing a commentary to Nagarjuna's fundamental treatise. And so then next is demonstrating that is the root of revolving in the cyclic existence. So that is page number 228, you can see. So when we talk about ignorance, there are two kinds of ignorance. Okay. One is innate ignorance and one is artificial ignorance. Okay. The innate ignorance is that come naturally to all of us. All sentient beings have that innate ignorance. All the sentient beings, has that. When I see any objects, there's appearance of that objects as inherent existing. Not only there's appearance of inherent object as appearing in, then there's immediately kind of grasping or misapprehend or apprehending that to be truly existent. That ones we all have, even the animal has, all sentient beings have. That is innate. Acquired ignorance is that when we, through reasoning and logics, then we kind of, make things more different tenets of schools, like some schools, things there is a permanent self, there is permanent, partless, and unity self or persons. Believing that is acquired ignorance. That is because they're using some kind of intellectual reasoning logic. It's not innate. They think, oh, self continue from one life to another life. The body cease, but there is something that go from life to life, and therefore there is so-called permanent self, soul. So then that one's not everyone have that ignorance. Animal doesn't have that ignorance. Many of us do not have that ignorance. And then of course within the Buddhists, Then there are some, who believe, there is a partless, like Babasiga and Sotandira, they believe there is a partless matter that is the basis of all other matters. That that partless matters coming together make a gross matter that we can see. But the fundamental, very smallest, partless matter is ultimate. Because that is the basis of everything, all the matters. So they think that is the ultimate. The gross matters, that is collection of many small partless matter, is not a ultimate, is a conventional, but the very basis of all these matters, this partless matter is the ultimate. That kind of belief or grasping is again another ignorance that has been acquired by kind of thinkings, reasoning. It's not innate, Then Mind Holy School reject that idea, I guess maybe I saw some article long time ago, there was something about the science were trying to find the God particle, I guess maybe they are talking about something like that, which is the basis of everything, And if they can find that, that will be the ultimate, kind of ultimate. That has been something that has been kind of, and even though I don't know exactly what that God particle, that I did saw some article where they were trying, either they found it or they thought they found it, or they were trying to look for it, that whatever, but in some of the Buddhist schools, they have this concept, that is the ultimate, and so then the Mind Holy School reject that, but then even though they say there is no, external physical matter or external objects that is partless and ultimate, but then they think the mind which is observing, the mind which is perceiving and observing those external objects is ultimate or truly existence. Again, that is another ignorance that is acquired by that. And then Sotandrika, Madhyamika school of thought, they even reject that. They say even the mind is not truly existing and not ultimately existence. But then they think that it exists by its own power, by its own entity. So then they come with this idea, there is something from the objective and there is the mind which is imputing together. So you see each as your school goes, is more and more subtle, more and more deeper. That is how the tenets help us to have a more subtle understanding. It's not just an argument among school. It's a way of thought to us to understand from gross level to more and more subtle level, And so then they says, oh, even the mind, not only the external object, even the mind does not exist truly. Even the mind does not exist ultimately. But then they think, there is something from objective side, and then there is mind labeling it, imputing it, coming together. Sometimes it is easy for us to, because to me, sometimes it feels like sometimes that seems to be more reasonable, There's something from objective and then your mind label on top of that, Then saying there is nothing from objective side and everything is merely imputed, Your mind still thinks there is something from objective side, And then Prasangika goes further and say, there's nothing that from objective side. There's nothing that exists by its own entity. Everything is merely imputed by the mind, by the thoughts. So that is intellectually acquired kind of. So here is saying, there are two kinds of ignorance: innate ignorance and intellectually acquired ignorance. Among those two ignorance, which is the very root of all the samsara and all the delusions and all the samsara, is the innate ignorance. The innate ignorance is the very root of all the delusions, is the root of all the samsara. And so therefore, Lama Tsongkhapa is very important to understand and crucial to understand those two differences. So then when we try to negate, the ignorance of intellectually acquired is not enough, because that cannot hurt the innate ignorance. It can hurt that intellectually acquired ignorance, but it will not hurt and overcome the innate ignorance. So in order to overcome the innate ignorance, then you have to, you have to refute and negate the way that innate ignorance apprehend the objects, not just the intellectually acquired ignorance. So, and so again, as Lama Tsongkhapa says here, yeah, so I think that is the two things that we have to kind of differentiate, okay? The two kind of ignorance. And then understanding which is the, among those two, the innate ignorance is the very root of all the delusion. That is the very first of the, is the very first of the 12 link. And so when we also, so therefore, even though in all these tenets and all these scriptures, even though they negate and refute those intellectually acquired ignorance, but that is always a way to, that is only way to, that's only a kind of supportive means to overcome the innate. It's not the direct kind of antidote to the innate ignorance. It's kind of like a kind of the, not the main one, it's a kind of side that can be helpful, And so same in meditations, when you try to meditate, yeah, I think maybe that is, and also here, Lama Tsongkhapa made clear, and also, in Kamala Shila, his stages the meditation also made clear, that when we study, and when you study and learn, and through that kind of reasoning logic, when we are trying to negate, is not for the sake of just debating and sake of arguing. We have to understand it is to take that kind of argument, to take that kind of reasoning logic into our meditations. It should be sometimes it is not like, if we understand this is just for sake of argument among different school of thought, and when it comes to meditation and practice, it's something else, then we are losing the points. We are going in the wrong directions. The very argument, the very debate among the different schools should be related to our own mind, because our mind have all those different, certain level of grasping all those different of that. So then it should be directed towards our own mind, directed to our own ignorance by taking that, because I think there is a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of people think, we just need meditation. Why study? What is the point of arguing with different schools? When you don't really understand that is when you don't really understand all these are a means to have a more subtle understanding of emptiness, dependent arisings, Because if you don't have that, sometimes you think you have understanding, but you might be off, So then when you go through like that, then it clears all the possibility of going wrong. You clear with all of that. Oh, this is not like that. It's not like that. It's not like that. It's not like that. It's not like that. And at the end, you say, oh, then. Otherwise, you think at the very beginning, this is it. Then maybe at some time after meditation, you think, oh, maybe that is that. Oh, maybe this is that. Maybe this is that. Then your mind is not strong, sudden. There's no certainty and strong that, so clearing all the, so I think that, and so that we should also bring that into meditation. And so here, again, as we already said, and each commentary, it says, yeah, in the middle way, it says, in order to abandon in order to abandon the innate ignorance, then we need to have the realizations of the selflessness or emptiness, selflessness of person and phenomena or emptiness. It is not enough just to have understanding of the self not existing permanently, So even though you might have understanding of the self not to exist permanently, but that will not be able to destroy the innate fundamental ignorance. And so then there is the example of that, I think we did go through similar, while this in the commentary is for clarification, this point, the absence of mutual relation explained away. While seeing snake in the hole of a wall, one house, to make oneself abandon the fear of the snake by clearing of doubt, saying there is no elephant here, alas would be laughable to others, So saying, is saying there's no elephant is not going to let your fear of the snake go away. In order to the snake to go away, you have to make sure there's no snake by analyzing that itself and by knowing that there is no snake. And when you know there is no snake in that hole in your wall, then your fear will be gone. But saying something unrelated with something, saying that, and so that will not be able to overcome that. And so that is what it's saying. And that is why identifying the correct ignorance is very important. As I mentioned, if we don't identify the ignorance correctly, then we miss the target, we miss the target. As I mentioned before, you know, it's like the target is in the south, and you are hitting, do you say what, arrow? You are shooting the arrow in the other side, and you will miss them. Is not a problem with the arrow itself, is not problem with the shooting. You might be good shooter, and you might be the arrow is really good, but then because you miss the target, and sometimes the meditation itself, the analysis itself might be correct, not wrong, but still it doesn't have same effect because we miss the target, because we have not really identified the ignorance properly. It's not like your meditation technique is something wrong, you know, in terms of like analyzing, like whether you use the 7 analysis that you use for Cheret, or whether we use the analysis, whether it's the oneness or the aggregate, or the separate from the aggregate, or whether we use, whether there is a self within your, you know, the 5 element or 6 element as Nagarjuna. So there are so many different analyses. Even you might be doing the analysis correctly, but still, you know, there's not really having any effect in transformation, because sometimes the mistake is not being able to identify the ignorance correctly, first place. And so that is why, again, we go through quite a bit here. So here it's, again, so here is Lama Tsongkhapa saying, you know, both, as we already mentioned before, whether the view of transitory collection is that the very root of all the cycle existence, or whether it's the, you know, and the ignorance that's grasping the person and the phenomenon to be inherently existing. You know, whether that ignorance or view, or whether which of them is the root of all the cycle existence. So Lama Tsongkhapa, both of them are root of the cycle existence. Both of them are the root of cycle existence. So that is where it is, you know. So in the number 4, you know, 229, where it says, although the both view of transitory collection and ignorance are the root of cyclic existence, they are not two root of cyclic existence. So it seems what it is saying is, you know, in some of the scriptures, they talk about there's no true root of cyclic existence. So if there is not two, okay, not 1 and 2, in many scriptures, in some, they say there is no true root of cyclic existence. If that is the case, so then here he is saying, isn't there true? Because both ignorance and the view of transitory collection, they both are root of cyclic existence, and they are true. And so then here clarifying that little bit what that means, you know. It is saying that when it says in some of the scriptures, when they say there is no true root of cyclic existence, what it means is there is no true root of cyclic existence that apprehend the object differently, okay? But in these cases, they apprehend both same way. The view of transitory collection apprehend the object to be inherent existence. Also, the ignorance apprehend object to be truly inherent existence. And so therefore, there is no contradictions. There is no contradictions of both of these two being both the view of there's no contradictions for the both ignorance and the view of transitory collection, both of them being root of cyclic existence, and the statement that said there is no true root of cyclic existence. What that means, there's no true contradictory. There's no true contradictory root of cyclic existence. Okay. Here, because they are not contradictory. Even though they are true, but they are not contradictory. And so that is where it's clarifying some of the statement that you see in some others Indian masters, where they said that there is no true root of the cyclic existence. And so I think, yeah, I think that is where Lama Tsongkhapa is clarifying, because both of them, whether it's a view of transitory collection or whether it's ignorance, both of them apprehend the object with truly existence, same way, same way. And so therefore, both of them can become, both of them, not can, both of them are root of cyclic existence, But for example, the mind grasping permanently is not root of the cyclic existence, even though it is ignorance, and even is the afflicted emotions, even though it is ignorance. And so there can't be, like, for example, the mind that apprehend permanently and that fundamental ignorance, or the view of transitory collection, both of them cannot be root of cyclic existence, because the view of transitory collections and the ignorance that grasps permanently, they apprehend very differently. Do you get it? The ignorance that apprehend permanently, it apprehends object permanently, not inherently. Whereas the view transitory collection apprehend the object as inherently. So the way they apprehend is different, not same. So therefore, both of them cannot be root of the cyclic existence of samsara. Whereas the view of transitory and ignorance, they both apprehend same way, in the way they apprehend inherently or truly. And so therefore both can become, both are the root of cyclic existence. I think that is mainly, so at the end of that, the end of that four, at the end, Lama Tsongkhapa said, therefore, both of them should be understood as ignorance. Okay, so that means the view of yeah, I think maybe before that, maybe we could. Maybe before that, maybe at the end of the 229, it said, although it does not appear that Venerable Chandrakirti clearly explained the view of transitory collections specifically as ignorance, even though he doesn't see, Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't, when he reads Chandrakirti's root and commentaries, he doesn't see very clearly mentioning that as an ignorance, the view of the transitory collections. Lama Tsongkhapa, he didn't see very clearly mentioning that. He generally said apprehension of things such as truly exist in afflicted ignorance. And that one, there's clear in that Chandrakirti's writing, but without distinguishing between person and phenomena, And also, Chandrakirti also assert the apprehension of self-person is the apprehension of person as established by way of their own character or by way of their own entity, Moreover, he frequently explained innate view of transitory collection as the root of cyclic existence. So in his writing, he explained that the innate, the view of transitory collection as being the root of cyclic existence very often, you know. If he assert to be different in meaning from the ignorance which is the apprehension of true existence, he would be positing true root of cyclic existence with the disconcord mode of apprehension. That is what I'm saying, disconcord, different, which will be contradictory, but that is not the case. Therefore, both of them should be understood as ignorance. Okay, so I think, so yeah, I think we will kind of conclude here. I think, okay, so yeah, I think, of course, you know, ultimately there is no arising, no going, no holding, no going. There's no samsara, there's no nirvana, there's no practice, there's no person who is practicing. Ultimately, all of that, but also conventionally, there is a person, ignorant person, and there is the meditation, the practice that need to be practiced, and there is the liberation that need to be achieved. There is a samsara that need to be overcome. So we cannot forget either of them. Sometime either we focus on the conventional world, relative world, and we become so emotionally, mentally caught up very strongly in emotions. And sometimes we think we are meditating on ultimate, and then we started, so there's no samsara, there's no nirvana, there's no delusion. And then again, we ignore, and the conventional world, we cannot ignore either of them. Both reality has to go together in that, and that is very important. I think sometimes we tend to ignore each of them, you know, and the true reality has to come together all the time, so that we don't fall in either of the extreme. And yeah, okay. Due to the merit of this virtuous action, may I quickly attain the state of Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the Supreme Jewel Bodhicitta that has not arisen, arise and grow, and may that which is arising not diminish but increase more and more. The wish-granting, wish-fulfilling Jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, to the incomparable contents in Gyatso, I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. Tu tu chang xin chang gen jia wei, ten zin zhong bei wei kun so to bo zi, xiao song hu wei le mo tu tu, pa da so du jie gun du xia pen shu. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.